affordable and rental housing strategy. My name is Arvind Prasad, and I'm the Commissioner of Development Services for the City of Markham. We begin tonight by acknowledging that we walk upon the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples, and we recognize their history, their spirituality, their culture, and stewardship of the land. We are grateful to all Indigenous groups for their commitment to protect the land and its resources, and we are committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. I would like to acknowledge the following members of Council that are joining us today for this very important meeting regarding the development of the city's affordable and rental housing strategy. We have with us tonight, and this is at my last count, Mayor Frank Scarpitti. Mr. Mayor. We have Regional Councillor Jim Jones, Regional Councillor Joe Lee, Regional Councillor Jack Heath. We also have Councillor Alan Ho, Councillor Keith Irish, Councillor Reed McAlpine, and Councillor Karen Rath. I'm not sure if I missed anyone from that list. And we also have Deputy Mayor Hamilton. I don't know if he's joined us yet, but I know he was on his way to joining us. And of course, we have our CAO, Andy Taylor, on the line. So thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. And of course, thank you to everyone else who's on the line. Affordable housing. It's a critical issue to the city and to the region. Did you know that 1 in 3 households in the city have housing affordability issues? And nearly 1 in 5 residents are spending more than 50% of their income on housing. The average price of a resale home in Markham has doubled over the past decade. And average market rents have also been increasing faster than inflation over the past decade. Today, you will hear about the work that the city has completed in preparing a new affordable and rental housing strategy. And we look forward to hearing back from you. Feedback, there'll be some opportunity for interaction tonight and opportunity to also answer your questions. So before I start, I would like to invite Mayor Frank Scarpitti to provide some introductory remarks. Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you very much, Arvind, and welcome to everyone. Really glad to see the number of people that are here for this very important discussion, and particularly want to thank all members of council who are here. Certainly, they've worked hard at this particular initiative as we move forward with a new affordable and rental housing strategy for the city of Markham. In my inaugural address at the beginning of this term, I did commit on behalf of Markham Council that we would be tackling the issue of housing affordability, and a particular commitment to hold a housing summit with various industry leaders, community stakeholders, all with a goal of providing more affordable and rental housing in Markham. And I have to say, unfortunately, since the beginning of this term, the situation has gotten worse, certainly right across the GTA, but here in Markham as well. And I am concerned and continue to be concerned that Markham more and more is becoming unaffordable to live in. And so whether it's someone who's had deep family roots in our community for many years, a recent graduate who's been attracted to our new downtown area, and of course our growing economy with the corporations that we have here, or a senior who's on fixed income, who's looking to scale down and live in something that's more manageable. I often hear concerns from parents and from others about the affordability challenge that we have in our community. Within York Region, I think most of you know the city of Markham is the largest municipality within the region, but we also have some of the greatest needs of affordable housing right here in our community. And it's interesting that the vast majority of the people who are on wait lists for subsidized housing choose Markham as their number one preference within the region. And I really think that speaks to the great work of our community, certainly all the stakeholders, our staff and council, the incredible community that we have in Markham. Now, Arvin did highlight some of the stats, and just to maybe build a little bit more on that, when we did our housing and assessment, our housing needs assessment study, we found that 1 in 3 households spend 30% or more of their household income on housing alone. And in fact, 1 in 5 households spend 50% or more on their household income on housing costs. And that puts a lot of stress and strain on individuals, on families, and indeed, fair to say, the entire community. And the average price of a home has more than doubled in the last 10 years. So in developing the draft affordable housing and rental strategy, the city has met with a variety of stakeholders, certainly the community housing providers to members of the development community, partners in government, and many individuals who've had the opportunity to speak to members of council on a personal level, certainly write to them and provide the type of input that we need. Now, a few months ago, back in November, we did host that Affordable Housing Summit that actually brought together various sectors in the building housing industry to discuss solutions, hopefully concrete solutions, about how our community can provide more affordable and rental housing. And I think it really spoke to the seriousness of the issue generally, but it also spoke to Markham's credibility about tackling this issue with the speakers that we had. And we had Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, Minister Ahmed Hassan was there. Ontario Premier Doug Ford also provided a very, very specific message to those attending the summit, and also the Ontario Minister of Municipal Affairs, Steve Clark. It also featured a keynote address by one of Canada's foremost planning experts on affordable housing, Dr. Avi Friedman from McGill University. And it also had a panel discussion of experts that was led by Tim Hudak, president of the Ontario Real Estate Association. Now, if you didn't get a chance to attend or see the summit back in November, I do invite you to watch the summit by going to yourvoice.ca, yourvoicemarkham.ca. Once again, the website is yourvoicemarkham.ca, and all you have to do is click on Markham's draft affordable and rental housing strategy, and you'll see the housing summit there. And you can certainly watch it. It was engaging, informative, and I think it really opened up a number of perspectives as to how we can move forward as a community. Now, tonight, after you hear the presentation, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your feedback. We also want to have questions from you. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's participated so far in this process. And I'm going to hand it over to Daryl Lyons, who's the manager of policy, to provide some additional information. But before I hand it over to Daryl, just recently, the city of Markham made the Forbes top 100 employers in Canada. In fact, we were number 18 out of 100, and we were the only, the top municipality in all of Canada. Now, I mention that because the city got recognized as one of the top employers. And I have to say that we're very fortunate in Markham that we have some of the best in our staff in the province of Ontario, indeed in Canada. And Daryl, I know you'll get to introduce some of your colleagues, but fair to say, we're very fortunate to have you and guiding us through this very, very important issue for our community. So over to you, Daryl.
Mr. Mayor, before we go over to Daryl, I just want to say that I apologize. I forgot to introduce Councillor Usman, who is also here. He was here since 6:29. So I missed him and I apologize. And we've also had Councillor Issa Lee join us. So we got a full house today, Daryl. So you're on next.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the warm welcome and setting the stage for this very important initiative in the city of Markham. And good evening to all members of council that are joining us today, as well as everyone else that is joining us for this virtual community information meeting on our draft Markham Affordable and Rental Housing Strategy. As the mayor had indicated, my name is Daryl Lyons, and I am the manager of policy at the city of Markham. I would like to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us this evening to learn and share your feedback and ideas about the draft affordable and rental housing strategy. The purpose of today's meeting is to present the draft strategy, including the large amount of work that has been completed to date on this initiative. And more importantly, even, is we want to hear your comments. We want to hear your feedback on the draft vision, the goals, and the actions that are contained in this draft strategy. You can also find all of this information regarding the draft strategy on yourvoicemarkham.ca, as the mayor had indicated, the web address, including the actual draft strategy and consultation document. As I see, we have a large number of participants joining this evening, which is really, really important, and it is great to see. We're hoping to get to as many of you throughout this session. We want to hear your comments and questions. However, I do recognize that we may not be able to get to everybody. So with that in mind, should we end up in that situation, please go to yourvoicemarkham.ca. The information will be in the deck that will be presented to you right after I'm done speaking. And you will find our contact information under who's listening. And you can send comments directly to us. Our email addresses are there. There's a feedback window. And then we are also, following this session, going to be putting up a survey by the end of the week in order to get that information. I also wanted to just acknowledge that we had Councillor Keys has just joined us this evening as well. So as you can see from this turnout, this is a very important issue. It's something that we take seriously. We want to see what actions we can take in order to tackle this large issue. So for the main segment of this meeting, it's going to be an interactive presentation delivered by Emily Irvine, who is our special projects coordinator, who has been working diligently on this strategy. For the interactive part, we're going to be asking you questions throughout this presentation through the polling tool in Zoom. That way we can get some quick feedback. We're going to share the results. Everyone is going to see it in real time. It's not going to be a process where we hear the results and you don't hear something for days or weeks for us to get something up on our website. You're going to see it in real time this evening. So please be prepared with your mouse or touch screen, depending on what type of device you're using tonight, in order to respond as we get through these polls. Following the presentation, we're going to be opening up the floor, or the virtual space in this case, to hear your input and provide input, and also to ask questions of us on the work that we've done to date. So in order to participate, if you wish to comment or ask a question following the presentation, please use the raise hand tool. You'll find it at the bottom of the screen, of the Zoom screen. It'll be a raise hand icon. If you have an older version of Zoom and it doesn't show up there, click under participants, and where you see the three dots on the bottom right-hand corner, you will see a raise hand option. And we will be going through the list of those that raise their hands and trying to go through that, as well as answering any questions. And we really want to hear your feedback. As a courtesy to other participants, if people can please keep your microphone muted, as well as turn off your video during the meeting unless you are called upon. The feedback today is extremely important. It is going to help inform the development of the final affordable and rental housing strategy that we anticipate bringing back to council for approval in the spring of this year. As a reminder, today's session is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. So please keep your webcam off if you wish to remain off of camera or the recording. As another element is that if you know somebody that was unable to attend this evening, please let them know that the recording will be uploaded to yourvoicemarkham.ca following this meeting so people can see what's happened. We are tracking the entire journey on the development of this strategy through the Your Voice Markham platform. With that, I want to turn it over to Emily Irvine for the presentation component. Thank you.
Your microphone, oh, you got it.
And now I think I'm unmuted. So we'll do that again. Good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to be here tonight, and all the work that we've done on the affordable housing strategy being presented to you this evening. We're also really happy about the response we've had. And I wanted to thank you for attending and your interest in Markham's draft affordable housing strategy. I'd like to provide you with an overview before we start of the draft strategy, including why we undertook this work, how we approached the study to get to this point, what our research findings were, and what is proposed in the draft affordable and rental housing strategy. Markham has been working to identify and address the affordable housing needs of its residents for a number of years. In 2011, Markham completed an affordable and special needs strategy and proceeded to implement a number of actions. Since this time, a number of things have changed. Housing needs have persisted and in some cases deepened. There have been new policies and funding programs from the federal, provincial, and regional governments. We want to be consistent with these new initiatives as they can support the city's goals. And finally, the housing market is different. Prices have continued to rise, but household incomes have not kept pace. In September 2018, City Council directed staff to update the affordable and rental housing strategy and undertake an inclusionary zoning framework to increase the supply of affordable and purpose-built rental housing in the city. We have completed a draft and now we want to share it with you. We undertook the study in a number of phases. Following council direction, the work for phase 1 began in early 2019 with housing needs assessment. This involved an analysis of demographic trends and the housing market, establishing the affordable housing threshold and identifying the housing gaps. The housing needs assessment was completed and presented to council in April 2019. The phase 2 work included a review of the roles and new initiatives from the federal, provincial, and regional governments, as well as stakeholder engagement. This phase also included a market assessment to develop the proposed inclusionary zoning framework. This was completed and presented to council in February 2020. We are now in phase 3 and 4. We have brought together the vision, goals, and proposed actions and inclusionary zoning framework into the draft strategy. Like so many other things in 2020, we needed to shift our work. We put information about the strategy online. The mayor hosted the Markham Housing Summit. This is also available online, as was mentioned, if you were not able to attend. Following our consultation tonight, which includes this meeting, and a survey will be posted on Your Voice Markham. We are planning to bring the strategy forward for approval in the spring. And now we'd like to ask you a couple of questions just to get a sense of who's in the audience. Could you please put up poll 1? So we'd like to know if you live in Markham. I'll just give everyone a minute to reply. Well, it looks like we have a lot of Markham residents with us this evening, but it looks like there are other residents from outside of the city. So that's really exciting to see. Can you please put up poll 2? Do you own or rent your home? So it looks like we have a lot of owners here this evening, but we have some renters. And that's not surprising because that's the profile of Markham's actual housing stock. We'll take down the poll now and continue the presentation if that's all right. Phase 1 needs assessment. Looked at current and emerging housing needs in Markham by analyzing population trends and the existing housing supply. It also established the city's affordability thresholds and concluded by identifying key housing gaps. The housing needs assessment reviewed a lot of data. It found there is a very tight rental market in Markham. The small supply of purpose-built rental housing is putting pressure on the vacancy rate. This vacancy rate was 1.2% in 2019. Information released just last week placed the current vacancy rate at 3.1 for 2020. This is the highest it's been in the last 30 years, which is as far back as we have data. There have also been significant rent increases in the last 10 years. Average market rent is rising faster than inflation, and household incomes are not keeping pace. In 2020, the average market rent increased again to $1,541. That's for all unit types. We understand that in some municipalities, there's been a decline in average market rents. As I mentioned, this information was just released last week, and we will look at this more closely, but this decline does not seem to have happened in Markham. Ownership prices are just as challenging. The average resale price in Markham has doubled over the last 10 years. There's been some diversity in the housing stock, but these units are smaller and not always appropriate for the range of housing needs in the city. Fundamentally, the current and emerging housing trends are making rental and home ownership unaffordable to the average household here in Markham. So what do we mean when we say affordable housing? Markham uses the provincial definition of affordable housing. Affordable is defined as housing where annual housing costs are not more than 30% of household income for low and moderate income households. Low and moderate income households are the lowest 60% of all households in the city. It's important to note that what is considered affordable is different for every municipality and it changes over time. It is based on local household incomes and current housing prices and rents. What is affordable in Markham? For Markham, affordable ownership is housing when it's priced at a maximum of $471,000 for the lowest 60% of the income distribution. For rental housing, this means rents of no more than $1,337, which is the average market rent. These figures are the result of the data that was available when the Phase 1 study was completed. The average market rent level released last week is higher. These thresholds will be updated to current information for the final strategy. Who needs affordable housing? The needs assessment found that 1 in 3 households in Markham have affordability issues. Nearly 1 in 5 are spending 50% or more of their income on housing. In terms of owners and renters, over 31% of owners and 50% of renters have affordability challenges. Our research found that a number of households could not find housing that met their needs. The city is seeing a shift to smaller households and youth-led households. There's a need for housing options for an aging population, including options to facilitate aging in place. There's also a need for family-sized units. This includes couples with children, lone parent households, and multiple households. The housing needs assessment identified 3 key housing gaps that inform the actions moving forward. There's a need for housing options that are affordable to households with low incomes and persons needing supports to live independently. And these options should include smaller dwelling units, family-sized units, and housing to facilitate aging in place. There's a need to increase the number of purpose-built rental housing. And there's a need to encourage the development of ownership options that are affordable to households with moderate incomes and appropriate for larger families. And now we'd like to ask you a couple of questions. Would you please put up poll 3?
So actually, before we start going into poll 3, one of the matters that we just realized was when we did the first 2 poll questions, the results did not come up on the screen. So I really quickly wanted to explain what the results were. So in the first question about those that live in Markham that are with us today or outside of Markham, 68% of participants today that are attending this meeting are living in Markham. On the second question, where we were trying to understand who owns, rents, or other, 78% of participants this evening own their home, 18% rent their home, and 4% have another situation. So with that, I will now turn over to question 3, and we will make sure that it shows up on the screen for the results for people.
Our apologies. Technology being what it is, there's got to be some glitch. Does your home meet your needs? Based on our responses, it looks like from our audience, 82% said their home met their needs, 14% that it did not, and a handful were undecided. Can we put up poll 4 up? If your home does not meet your needs, does one or more of the following describe your situation? And you can choose as many as apply. And perhaps if your home meets your needs at this point, you might be thinking for the future. So it looks like we have a wide diversity of reasons where people's homes might not meet their needs. Some have homes that are too small, some that are bigger than what they need, some are not accessible or far from work. And that's kind of what we found in our housing needs assessment as well. I want to just say that these questions also mirror the survey that we have on Your Voice Markham. So if you'd like to, we will put that up in the next couple of days, as was mentioned. And you'll be able to provide more details for us. Can we launch poll 5? Is your household experiencing housing affordability issues in that the costs of the home are more than 30% of your household income? So it looks like our numbers are not that far off. Just over a third said they were experiencing affordability issues. Phase 2. The Phase 2 work reviewed the roles of all those involved in housing. If we can align our work and build partnerships, we can be more effective in addressing Markham's housing needs. We also consulted with stakeholders and completed a housing market assessment before we brought forward the recommended actions and inclusionary zoning framework. We did this in February. This was completed in February 2020. The housing crisis is widespread and all levels of government have been engaged in addressing housing challenges. The Phase 2 work included a review of who does what. The federal government introduced Canada's first housing strategy in 2017 and has a number of programs such as the National Housing Co-Investment Fund and recent Rapid Housing Initiative to develop new housing. The provincial government is responsible for the Planning Act, which puts in place the legislation under which municipalities operate. The Region of York is the housing manager for Markham. It receives housing funding from senior levels of government and develops policies and programs with which the city is aligned. In addition to the public sector, the development community and nonprofit community produce much of the housing in the city and are very important partners. Markham is using the tools available and developing its own housing strategy to address housing needs. Who did we engage with? To complete the Phase 2 study and update the policy framework, we consulted with all these stakeholders to get feedback and input into the strategy, including meeting with the various levels of government, the not-for-profit sector, as well as support services agencies in York Region, and we met with the development community. The key messages we heard are that policies should ensure the development of complete communities. Our community should be including housing for families, people with disabilities, smaller households, and the aging population, as well as low-income households. One of the things we also heard is the need to educate and raise awareness of the need for a broad range of housing, including affordable housing. In terms of the inclusionary zoning policy, we heard it should be flexible and monitored on a regular basis. We also heard about the importance of providing incentives, both financial and non-financial, such as fast tracking, to encourage the development of affordable and purpose-built rental housing. Finally, we heard about the importance of land and using land more efficiently through land sharing, repurposing, and using vacant sites. Markham's draft affordable and rental housing strategy has been developed from the research and consultation in Phase 1 and Phase 2 of this project. It consists of a vision, 3 goals, 34 actions, and an inclusionary zoning framework. The draft strategy vision is to support the social and economic vitality of the City of Markham through the facilitation and provision of a range of housing options for Markham residents and workers through their lifetime in order to sustain a more complete community. In keeping with the vision that was developed with the community, it is in keeping with the vision that was developed with the community back in 2011. It was validated again through the study process, and it is aligned with the recently released strategic plan. The goals that were developed for the strategy are based on the housing gaps. The first goal is to increase the supply of affordable and rental housing options, particularly for small and larger households. With low incomes, that means meet their needs in terms of the size and accessibility and support services. The second goal is to stimulate the development of ownership options, particularly larger options for families which are affordable to households with moderate incomes, as well as those with low where feasible. And the third goal is to expand the supply of purpose-built rental housing throughout Markham. There are 34 actions being considered for the strategy. These include policy changes, financial incentives, advocacy, partnerships, and actions focused on education. Now I'm going to provide a high-level overview of the actions. There are 12 proposed policy actions. The first action is to set annual housing targets. We do have targets, but we may want to include more detail in terms of tenure and type. Action 2 involves refining the definition of affordable ownership so that it isn't just one figure, but perhaps associated with a number of bedrooms being provided and income as well. 2 of the critical actions involve the development and implementation of inclusionary zoning, and I will provide some detail on that in a little bit. A number of actions are to ensure that there are no barriers to innovative ideas, such as home sharing and tiny homes. This may mean looking at our policies and zoning together to make sure they are up to date. Action 6 is to comply with new provincial requirements for secondary suites, also referred to as additional residential units. Other policy actions include reducing parking requirements that were appropriate to help reduce development costs, and using surplus lands for affordable housing. And for Markham to continue to support projects receiving government funding. Markham has a long history of supporting community-based nonprofit housing, and that should continue.
Before we go into this slide, I just wanted to raise that we have seen that there are some hands being raised. We do see that there are some questions, but we would like to try and just run through the remaining bit of this deck. It's going to be about a little less than 10 minutes to run through the deck, and then we'll be going back to those questions. So just wanted to acknowledge we do see that people have questions.
Thank you, Daryl. In terms of financial incentives, the actions around these, we're considering this more broadly, not just in terms of financial, but also important are improvements in processes such as fast tracking applications and perhaps changes in zoning to bring projects to construction earlier and reduce costs. There are also opportunities for incentives for projects with energy efficient features and actions to consider an ongoing program to provide these incentives. Advocacy action are a large group representing the policies and programs from senior levels of government and changes that would further support housing affordability. 3 actions are focused on the National Housing Strategy. These propose enhancing the co-investment fund, the first-time home buyer incentive, by extending or expanding eligibility. Other ideas in these actions are the possibility of advocating for HST relief for nonprofit affordable housing providers, enhancing the Canada Housing Benefit, and finding a way to align the funding application processes, as well as advocating to CMHC for fixed interest mortgage for 25 years. Other advocacy actions include trying to persuade the province to increase their capital funding for affordable housing projects, and possibly share the non-residential speculation tax revenue with municipalities, to provide land at no or reduced costs, to help with streamlining of the approval processes involving provincial agencies, and monitoring the implementation of inclusionary zoning. A last action around advocacy is to develop a home sharing pilot project. Part of the work that was completed in phase 2 was to identify the roles and responsibilities of other agencies and stakeholders. The actions around partnerships speak to those. We've heard a lot about how important these can be. There's a role for Markham in facilitating the development or redevelopment of vacant or unused properties. And this could be land owned by faith groups, various levels of government, or nonprofits, and others that are interested in affordable and supportive housing. And there's also a need to support people living in affordable and supportive housing by supporting social enterprises which provide employment opportunities and training for these individuals. Education actions are also among the recommendations. These involve increasing awareness of the need for affordable housing and purpose-built rental housing. There's also a need to increase the capacity and knowledge of the private and nonprofit sector in order for more affordable and supportive housing to be built. This might include educational materials and workshops. Finally, there's an action speaking to the need to promote alternative forms of affordable ownership housing. We've heard a lot about shared equity, rent to own, so promoting these is also important. It's important to note there's not one solution to address the affordable housing crisis, but it needs to be approached from a broad spectrum of actions, and that's what we have tried to do And that's what we're proposing here. And now we'd like to move to our last group of poll questions. If we could put up poll 6, please. This group of poll questions relates to the actions that I've just gone over. Which of the top 3 policy actions should the city pursue as part of its affordable and rental housing strategy? Choose 3, please. There's 3 to choose from, so we'll leave a little bit of time for this question, but I see many people have answered. Just a couple of more seconds. So it looks like surplus land for housing, implementing inclusionary zoning, and facilitating additional residential units are among where the participants of this meeting have thought the city should focus its actions. Using surplus land for housing is something we've heard before, as the importance of implementing inclusionary zoning. Can we please share poll 7?
One more administrative note. We have just heard that some people, if you're using an Apple device, an iPad, these poll questions may not be showing up on your screen. I'm not sure, it must be something to do with the Zoom. But either way, as Emily had indicated, we're going to be taking these results and then we'll be posting them back up on Your Voice Markham at the end of this event. So that way you can come back and you can see all of the polls that were done as well as the results.
And in addition to that, thank you, Daryl. In addition to that, the survey that will be going up on Your Voice Markham will be very similar, if not identical, to some of the questions you have. And they'll provide you an opportunity to provide comments as well as just an opinion in selecting 3. So this question looks at the incentives the city should be pursuing and whether they should be pursuing them as part of the affordable and rental housing strategy. So it looks like most people have voted. And it's pretty clear that this is something that people are interested in, the city should pursue. Thank you. Poll 8. We have a large bundle of advocacy items, and we were curious as to where people thought the city should focus its efforts if we had to choose. It looks like most people have voted. So it looks like Public Land for Housing again received the highest scores. In addition to this, looks like the participants of this meeting are interested in capital funding for affordable housing. As well as interest-free mortgage. Now, these are various opportunities and programs for different levels of government, and they involve advocating to different levels of government. Can we please put up poll 9, please? Should the city be pursuing partnerships to help facilitate affordable and rental housing as part of its affordable and rental housing strategy? So there's a pretty decisive response to this question. Partnerships is something we've heard all along through our consultation. It's something we also heard in our summit, and it looks like 89% of the participants of this meeting agreed with that. And the last poll. Involves the last bundle of actions. Should the city be pursuing actions on education to raise awareness on affordable and rental housing approaches, incentives, and partnerships as part of its affordable and rental housing strategy? It looks like almost everyone has voted. And again, we have a pretty definitive response to this. And the vast majority suggest the city should be pursuing education actions. This is part of what we found in our research, is the lack of understanding on affordability and affordable needs. So that's why these actions made it into our strategy. Thank you very much for participating in our polling. And now I'd like to move on to the last segment of our presentation, the proposed inclusionary zoning framework. Among the actions we're proposing to move forward with alongside the strategy is the development and implementation of inclusionary zoning. I'd like to provide an overview of this for you. Inclusionary zoning is a tool under the Planning Act. It can be used by municipalities to increase the supply of affordable housing. As it has been used in other jurisdictions, although not yet in Ontario, it typically requires that developers dedicate a portion of new residential developments as affordable housing. Inclusionary zoning was introduced in the Planning Act in 2017 and amended in 2019 to apply to major transit station areas or where a community planning permit system is in place. The proposed framework for inclusionary zoning has been developed with the support of a housing market impact assessment by Enberry Lyon Consultants. The stakeholder consultation also included discussions around this framework. The framework identified where inclusionary zoning would be required, how many units are to be affordable, how long they will remain so, as well as the income households that will be targeted and price levels for these units. In terms of where inclusionary zoning will apply, it will apply to lands around major transit station areas. This has been established by the province. We heard from the community that they would like to see IZ or inclusionary zoning beyond these areas. So one of our actions includes the request for a community planning permit system, which would also permit inclusionary zoning outside of major transit station areas. Inclusionary zoning policies need to specify a size of development to which it would apply. We are proposing that developments of 100 units or greater is where inclusionary zoning would be required. The affordable requirement or set aside refers to the amount of affordable housing that would need to be provided. The inclusionary zoning framework proposed that the affordable requirement would be 10% of the gross floor area of condominium developments and 5% of the area in rented condominium developments. There's no requirement in purpose-built rental developments at this time. In addition, there will be a requirement that a minimum of 40% of the affordable units set aside will be 2 and 3 bedroom units to reflect the needs for family size units in the community. The policy also required to identify the period of time that units are to remain affordable. The inclusionary zoning framework proposes that the units are to remain affordable in perpetuity or a minimum of 25 years. Inclusionary zoning policies are to identify target markets for the units. Units obtained through inclusionary zoning should be to address the affordable housing needs of low and moderate income households from the 3rd to the 6th decile. Affordable rents and house prices must meet the definition in Markham's official plan and the thresholds that were identified earlier to a maximum ownership price of $471 and a rental of $1,337 overall. Although this data, although the rental data especially shows the range by type of unit. The inclusionary zoning policy and bylaw will include provisions for monitoring the impact of the policy at least every 5 years as required. As well, a status report be provided to council every 2 years to track performance. In terms of our process in developing and finalizing our strategy, after this evening, information on Your Voice Markham and a survey will be posted this week to obtain more feedback. We are planning that the final strategy and inclusionary zoning framework will be brought to Markham Council in the spring of this year. Work on the priority actions will continue over the summer. So this concludes the overview of the strategy, and we'd like to open it up right now for questions.
Okay, so looking at our list, Michael Gagnon has a question. Can we please turn on his mic and video? For a question or comment? Okay, we may have to come back to Michael. I see that Peter has a question as well.
Oh, sorry, I've only just been unmuted. Daryl?
Good evening, Michael.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, I can't do video, but I can do audio.
Okay.
So thank you very much for good presentation, lots of hard work. Thank you. I have a question about, first of all, the defined problem. I saw initially it was in, there were 3 gaps. Understand the rental gap. First question relates to why is purchase considered a gap? Why is it a requirement that people must be able to purchase within the city of Markham, as opposed to be able to simply afford to rent in the city of Markham? Why is that considered a problem? And then my second and also related question, I grew up in a council house, and it was owned by the municipality. A lot of other cities have chosen to take a similar solution. Municipalities own property and own, therefore, the rental housing that they can therefore, as a result, rent out at an affordable rent. I don't think I saw that as one of the possible solutions, that municipalities, whether it's Markham or the region, should be owning land, building rental housing. So two related questions and comments. Thank you.
Okay, so Emily, did you want to start on that, or do you want me to start?
Why don't you go ahead and start?
So, Michael, really good question. So, in accordance with provincial policy, we are looking to provide for a mix and range of units and uses. So, we're looking at both the affordability side being ownership as well as on rent. So, as you'll see within our consultation document, it speaks to meeting the definition of affordability, which is outlined within the provincial policy statement, meaning that 30% of gross income. And when you look at that, it actually has elements within this material in the deck, as well as in our consultation material, that speaks to the average rent for affordability, which would have been $1,337 a month on average to hit an affordability threshold. But I agree with you that in the fact that when we're looking at addressing affordability issues in the city of Markham, we need to be looking at both ownership and rental. So it is not one element of just looking at ownership, it is both.
So the answer is that the province is telling us that we should be able to offer housing at an affordable purchase price. Is that the answer?
So the province outlines within the provincial policy statement a definition of affordability and requires us to plan for a mix and range of uses, including affordable housing. And affordable housing means both affordable ownership and rental. So as you'll have seen within the different objectives and the actions that we have in the draft strategy, we're looking at a range of things. One, we want to see purpose-built market rental. We want to see affordable rental. We also want to see affordable ownership.
Thanks, Daryl. And how about the municipalities engaging in the ownership and development and operation of affordable rental housing?
So, Michael, sorry to interject, Daryl. I'll just turn on the video quickly, but that is done by the region. So through York Housing Corporation, they do own buildings, and through various programs then provide assistance to people who need subsidized housing. And when they do projects now, we've got a couple of them, and I know that Mike Clare and others will probably speak to this as well, have helped develop some of those projects, but certainly York Housing would be the local level of government that would do it. It's not done at the city level, and again, it speaks to a division of responsibilities. So we're not, tripping over each other. But York Housing does have several buildings throughout the region that provides for both the opportunity for subsidized housing, certainly more affordable, and then market rent, because they like to have a mix within their buildings. Sorry, Del, I didn't mean to interject. I thought just quickly answer that one.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. How do we make sure that the region, therefore, makes as big a contribution as possible into helping solve our problem in Markham?
So in response to that, you'll see specific actions within the draft strategy that speak to advocacy, that we need to be working with our partners, working with the service manager, which is York Region and Housing York, working with the province of Ontario, as well as with the federal government in order to leverage opportunities. But it's also working with all other sectors, working with the development sector, working with nonprofits. This is one matter in order to tackle and address affordability and affordable housing. All sectors need to be working together and finding partnerships in order to make things work. And that's where you'll see is the common thread through that draft strategy is the fact of partnerships, breaking down silos, having those conversations and finding solutions to affordability.
Thank you.
I think part of the answer too on that one, Michael, they're active, and part of the problem, certainly, these things tend to go in cycles, but part of the problem has been the absence of the senior levels of government as it relates to providing a program and dollars. And just recently, the federal government did introduce the Rapid Housing Initiative. And through that particular program, Markham has come forward with 2 potential sites, which actually did go through to application by the region. So it's good. We need the other levels of government to provide the funding for these programs, because we can't fund those capital dollars from property taxes. It's just not the right place to be raising the capital for those major projects.
Okay, so I see that Peter has a question. If you want to turn on your video and unmute.
Yes, I'm unvideoed, and I think I'm unmuted. So my question relates to secondary suites, and I'm talking about the registered licensed version. Notwithstanding what you got in Article 6 or your Action 6, which is pretty narrow, Markham seems to be an outlier in that we only permit secondary suites in most parts of the city if you get a zoning bylaw amendment, which strikes me as an unnecessary barrier. Why don't we join many of our neighboring cities, as I understand it, and make secondary suites as of right, say in detached homes?
So Peter, in response to that, you will see that we do have an action within the draft strategy about considering second units and looking at the applicability and appropriateness and figuring that out. So it is something that is in the draft strategy for consideration.
Well, I read that, Daryl, but it looked like it was pretty sneaky. You say here in Action 6, study it, blah, 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 where secondary suites are currently permitted, which to me means some of the newer developments it's permitted, but older parts of the city, it's not permitted. Am I right or wrong with that?
So with that in mind, so our official plan, the Markham Official Plan 2014, does speak to second units, speaks to their permission for them. But of course, when you're looking at second units, you need to find the appropriate locations for these to be within as well. So I take your comment. It's something that we'll be looking at, as you've rightfully pointed out. We have an action that is looking at second units. I appreciate hearing your comment about that and your perspective of having them permitted in other areas. So that's right. Something that, of course, that we'll have to look at through this process. But that's the whole point of having this consultation, is to hear the different perspectives and ideas. Okay. And I'm happy to hear at least we have an action that sort of touches on the tone of what you're looking at and thinking. So it became a bit of a starting point. So
thank you. And I have one, I had another question, which I'm not going to ask, but I can submit that through Your Voice, Markham, and it'll get to you that way?
Correct. Contact information is there. We'll have a survey up by the end of the week for feedback, but all of our contact information is there as well.
All right, great.
Thank you. I see we have Sergi. Good evening, Sergi.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. This is specifically regarding the availability of municipal land, and this subject has come up in the polls quite a bit. as we all know, all across Canada, municipalities have supplied, donated land to spur the growth of affordable housing. Durham and Peel are our neighbors who have done the same thing. So my question is, what steps is Markham taking to provide municipal land to spur the growth of affordable housing?
So in response to that, Surjit, you'll see in action that we are looking at incentives. And when we're looking at incentives, there's a wide range of things that the city will want to be thinking about, from ways where we can improve our speed on processing, to our partnerships, to looking at potential lands, looking at potential surplus lands. There's a wide variety of things that we would be looking at through this strategy. And then once the draft strategy goes through council and becomes final, should those actions stay in looking at that, we'd be coming back with implementation packages to explore these things in further depth, looking at whether it be surplus lands, whether it be a range of different incentives. So it's one of those things that it will take steps for us to get through that. But this is starting the conversation about the different things that we need to be looking at and thinking about in order to help facilitate affordable and rental housing.
Thank you, Darrell. But what I like to express this, that before the land is declared surplus, there is municipal land available. So rather than go through the process of calling it surplus, one should be looking at how are we going to spur the growth of affordable housing by looking at the existing pool of municipal land, and which I think we have plenty of it in Markham. Thank you.
Thank you, Surjit. And I see we have Gary Gladstone has a question or comment. Gary?
Just had some technical difficulties. So first of all, my name is Gary Gladstone, lead stakeholder relations for RENA, assisting those with developmental disabilities. First and foremost, I really want to thank the mayor, council, Darrell, Emily, everybody involved in the strategy. When you indicate so clearly as your first housing gap that we need to find with low incomes and persons needing supports to live independently, you are way ahead of the curve, and thank you very much for being there on behalf specifically of those with developmental disabilities, a targeted vulnerable community as per the National Housing Strategy. The need for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities is huge, with a housing waiting list of over 40 years within the province of Ontario. One of the big difficulties that we have is the deep affordability that must come into play. Most of the individuals we support are on ODSP, and their monthly rental allowance is $497. And that's something that I'd like to know how you will be addressing. In terms of working with partners and working with other levels of government, 100%. I would turn to the mayor and members of regional council to continue working with York Regional Council to ensure that Housing York's mandate is expanded to what it once was, which includes those requiring supports, which they now indicate is not the case. Rent supplements are a very important tool that we will be speaking with the region and will continue to do about. And we're also very hopeful that the province, with the bilateral agreement from the Co-Investment Fund of National Housing Strategy, will allocate funds specifically for at-risk communities when it goes down to the service manager, because otherwise, particularly those with developmental disabilities, get left behind. So my question is specifically on the deep affordability, and also to thank you for recognizing that the first gap is there, and to make sure that all of the goals and all of the work that you're doing goes back to that to ensure that we can have fulsome communities. Thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you for your comment, Gary. To sort of start off the response to that. So getting down to the 497, a month it can be quite challenging. As you can see from the earlier slides within the presentation, we're really looking at really trying to get to the third to sixth decile, and even that is extremely challenging, let alone getting down to the first and second decile. This is also something that Housing York is more appropriately as the service manager is looking at that deep need, and that's where they have subsidized housing, the wait list, the approach that is done through them. But it is something that I have heard through the conversations we've been having as we've been developing this draft strategy on how do we look at deep need and not just affordable housing in the third to sixth decile. So it is something that sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Just wanted to quickly add, I want to leave you to answer most of these questions so we can get through them efficiently. But as Gary, I think, knows, the region will, we just had a major report on this on our regional council agenda, and we will continue to actively work with the provincial government to increase, because there is a major gap there for these individuals that absolutely can live independently and should be living independently, but need the financial support to be able to do that. So that is, and the other regional councils that are here are very supportive of that, as well as most of us were around the regional council table. So we need to put the pressure on, because particularly when we have other things going on right now, I think those needs are kind of forgotten, and sometimes they're certainly not in the appropriate priority list that they should be. So we need to do more there. But it's not, again, something the city itself will provide or the region itself will provide, just because there are so many groups that service and provide support to these individuals, that we need to get the province to step up and give it the appropriate funding that it needs.
From all levels of government, and I thank you very much for your leadership, Mayor.
Okay. I see we have somebody that is identified as Renter01. If you wanted to unmute and turn on your video, please, for your question or comment.
Hi.
Hello?
Hello. Hi, I'm a renter, so I'm not comfortable disclosing my name with a lot of owners out there. In Quebec, the renters' rights are protected better, so I might be comfortable there. Here in Ontario, we have very less, so I'm not going to disclose my name. So, coming to my question, you mentioned about 34 actions and incentives, but I did not see the disincentive. Anything which is disincentive, like a disincentive for those who buy and leave units empty, or disincentives for creating multi-house landlords who would park foreign money or whatever, and then buy whatever houses you will end up creating. So disincentive is my focus. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for Emily?
Yeah, thank you for your comments. And you raise a very important point. We certainly don't want to see vacant units out in the community when there's such a high demand and need. So thank you for your points. We'll take them into consideration.
Okay, thank you. I see we have Andy has a question. If you'd like to turn on your video and mic.
Yeah, I'm here.
Good evening, Andy.
Good evening. Thank you, Commissioner Prasad, Mr. Mayor, Councillors Daryl and Emily. This is a really good piece of work, a comprehensive strategy, 34 recommendations. A lot of them make sense. I have one comment and then a question. A number of the strategies seem quite passive, in my opinion, rather than active, beginning with words like consider or review, or other words that are maybe not action oriented. I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity to put a little bit more action and timeliness in these recommendations. And then secondly, for recommendations 10 and 25, which I think are very good, I think it's unreasonable to put all of this work on the shoulders of existing city staff. That work will need specialized skills and knowledge. And I'm wondering if there's been any consideration of implementing a special body of some type, whether that's an agency or a board or some sort of organization, company, that would help to identify, negotiate, administer, and work on those two recommendations, which are to identify surplus or underutilized land for better purposes. So I think that should be done on a not-for-profit basis, on a cost recovery basis. There should be no cost out of pocket for the city of Markham. And the city already has groups like this. I think of Markham Energy Corporation. I think that's a model that we could follow for implementing this sort of an idea. Maybe that's the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Excellent questions. With respect to the first question about passive language, one of the things that I'd be very interested in is if you wanted to, as I mentioned through the Your Voice Markham website, I'd really appreciate if you want to take a look at those different actions, if there's any in particular, if you have ideas on different language we can put. This is something that we have 34 actions. We're looking at them. We're taking all of this feedback. We'll be looking at whether they're going to be action-oriented, stronger terms, less passive language. We want to have a good, strong strategy that is going to have implementable actions. And then, of course, that will follow up with implementation packages that we would be working on. So we do want to make sure that the language hits the right tone and sets that stage in order to help tackle this affordable and rental housing issue. So with that, please visit the Your Voice Markham, email me. My contact information is there. Emily's contact information is there. Would really like to hear your ideas and your feedback on those specific actions. On the second item, looking at the special body, that's a very interesting comment. And I've actually just jotted that down about the Markham Energy Corporation, looking at whether there could be a development corporation or some other method in order to look at those actions. And that is, it's a really helpful comment because, of course, as you can appreciate, it's one thing to come up with an action. The next thing is really where the rubber hits the road, is really trying to determine the implementation of those actions and how do we achieve those outcomes.
So Daryl, just on that last point, it's Arvind Prasad, Commissioner of Development Services. In terms of resourcing this, you know, there's 34 different areas here. We'll be establishing priorities through a process, council process. Once those priorities are established, we'll be doing implementation planning. And then once we have the implementation plans, we know what we want to work on. We will be resourcing that appropriately. So it's kind of early to get into resourcing issues until we know exactly what is that bundle of work which is going to make the greatest impact on affordable housing for our community. But definitely resourcing it is forefront in my mind, and we'll be moving down that road. So thank you very much, Andy, for bringing that up.
Okay, and I see we have Harry has a question. If you can unmute yourself and turn on your video.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good evening,
Okay,
Harry.
so I just have two comments. They're not necessarily questions. The first is the recommendations on their own seem reasonable and comprehensive, but it would be helpful, I think, to have comparable or best practice information so that we can learn from others and compare these recommendations. You know, we're not the only municipality dealing with these issues, and so that would be helpful. The second comment is, I know we're kind of stuck with provincial legislation, but in reality, it's a very poor affordability definition. And it works against some of these cities' objectives as it relates to building complete communities, because the definition says if you're already a rich community, affordable housing, you know, that definition puts affordability higher than it would if you were a poorer community. So I think that's problematic, and we really should be pushing back against the province. I mean, this is a long-standing definition and issue. And if we want to truly build complete communities, we shouldn't be looking at the letter of the definition of affordability. Thank you.
No, thank you for those comments. We will definitely be considering those. And as we've mentioned earlier through this conversation and through the earlier presentation, in order to address this issue, it is going to take partnerships and supports at all levels: provincial, federal, regional, municipal, and all sectors. I think it's something that we all need to be thinking about how do we do that. So I really appreciate your comments, especially as we look at the affordable definition. You will note in the inclusionary zoning framework, we are looking at how to potentially break that down, looking at 1 bedroom versus 2 bedroom versus 3 bedroom. But at the end of the day, it's still based predominantly off of the framework from the province, which is outlined in the provincial policy statement. With that, I see Alec has a question. If you want to unmute yourself and turn on your video, please. Good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, my name is Alec. Congratulations with the folks working on this affordable housing strategy. So I see a lot of good positive feedback. And one of the questions that I had, I specifically want to talk about the inclusionary zoning, which is right now is on the key development area as well as the regional center. So if I look at your 3 to 6 decile, so based on the income level that you guys talk about with the third and the fourth, which is at 245,000 as well as the 315,000. If you calculate the market price right now in Markham, it's approximately $800 per square feet. So if I transcribe that into the number of feet that they can afford, for the third decile, we're talking about 306 square feet, and then for the fourth one is 393 square feet, and the fifth is the 487, and then the sixth is the 588. If you realize the 3 and 4 is already out of the question, because like anything that is less than 400 square feet, there's no, I think there's very limited bank will provide back the mortgage. That's number one problem. So I think, I tend to agree, because like basically like each year, we're talking about at least $50 per square feet increase, given the situation of the marketplace, and investment in buying the real estate seems to be a wealth management type of tool. So I can see the ongoing increase in the price of the per square feet. So given all this inclusionary zoning is not being ready and take a couple of years, by the time this surface in the house market, all this decile is already outdated. So I tend to agree with the first speaker, which is Michael Gannon. So I think as much as we have to talk about the ownership, which is part of the Ontario jurisdiction. So I think the affordable rental is probably the way to go, all right? And then given the fact that York region is shooting for 35% target, right now we're still 10. I think they're talking about 20 years time frame. So eventually we will get there. So one of the solutions that I see that is already happening in Vancouver and Richmond, some of my friends, what they did is like they have a group called Kiwanis. It's more or less like those you can find in Ontario with the nonprofit rental association. So what they did is, because like in any development, future development, if it is in the inclusionary zoning area, hopefully we can fight for the 25% for the rest of the outside the key development area in the future. So what happened is like there's more and more rental unit will become available by the developer, right? So if that is the case, so what they did is they have partnership. What the Kiwanis group did is like for the rental unit for any development, they make negotiation with the developer like either at cost or at a discount, depends on, where's the condition. So this is something is happening. And one of my friends is already doing it, was providing 290 unit for the affordable senior. So it's a workable solution. So that's one of the questions that I had. It's city. I'm sure city is looking for partner. Before the partner come along, because there's also financial equation that they have to fulfill. It work in Vancouver, it may not necessarily work in here. So is York region, is York Housing Corp is willing to take some of these rental unit and then we rent it out, to the general public? So that's one question. So you guys already looking into the fact that with all these nonprofit rental association, to collect all those rental unit, provided by the developer, so that they can manage the property and rent it out, in an affordable rate. So that's another question. So since the third and fourth decile, it's, not quite working. And then is with the ongoing wrecking with the house price, the rental will continue to grow. We cannot continue to subsidize. So I was wondering if City of Markham will reconsider the rooming housing. So that's probably another way, because I don't see the secondary unit or tertiary unit, provided provincial is going to be effective, because you also have the driveway requirement for the secondary street, not to mention about the first street. It's very, if they build it, it's probably for personal use. If they rent it out, it's going to be a business solution, which a lot of them would not want to spend 100,000 to rent away before they can do the rental. So
Alec, that's great. Yeah, thank you very much for your questions. It's you got us all thinking, I think. So I think at this point what we can do is, with respect to your questions around there's a referral here to the region on some of your questions. We can do that, absolutely. In terms of rooming housing, the city has taken a position on that. It's recently through our consolidated zoning bylaw. So you can find that information on our website. And the rest of your comments, we've noted it, and definitely we'll take your comments into account as we move forward in this process. So thank you very much. Daryl, next.
Thank you. So I'm just cognizant of the time, as our event was going to go to 8 o'clock, but I really don't want to shut down in the fact that we still have about 5 more questions. So I'd like to get through the 5 questions that we have listed. And then if there are any other questions that still come up, as I'd mentioned, yourvoicemarkham.ca, please go there, give us your feedback. You'll have all our contact information. So with that administrative moment, Mike, I see that you have a question or comment. If you want to turn on your mic and video, please. Oh, Mike? Oh, there we go.
Thank you. I just want to compliment the city staff and councilors, ward councilors, and Frank. This whole process represents a lot of hard work that has taken place over the last 18 months or more. And it's very forward thinking and very, very progressive. And my compliments go out to everybody who's worked diligently on this. I just have 2 rather pedantic questions about one, inclusionary zoning, and also the partnerships with not-for-profits. And when I'm looking at your comments on inclusionary zoning, you say for one factor was 10% gross floor area. I was just wondering if could that be defined as gross living area, or does it include all the common elements as well? And if it's living area, 10% would be more housing than if it's just the gross area. And secondly, in terms of the partnerships, I was wondering, for organizations like the Markham Interchurch Committee for Affordable Housing, there are other organizations like us in the community. Would the city sort of have a registry of complementary organizations and maybe put together certain developers and not-for-profits so that, you know, we can work together, because we don't always know what developers are doing what in the area. But if the city had a registry of organizations such as ours, and Gary's, Gladstone's, RENA, then we could probably get a larger group of not-for-profits working with developers.
Okay, oh, Emily,
No, that's all right. If you wanted to go ahead, please.
go ahead.
Thank you for your comments. In terms of inclusionary zoning and gross floor area, that is yet to be defined, but we take your comment, and that is a very good point. That will be further refined in the implementation. And in terms of partnerships and registries, again, a very, very good comment. I am aware of other municipalities that have started this once they've started their affordable housing work, and it's something that we want to consider and make sure that, because we've heard from yourselves and we've heard from other nonprofit organizations, and I think facilitating partnerships with others in the community will help move some of these projects forward.
And Emily, just to note, the start of this process seems like a very long time ago, but one of the first meetings we had was a mayor's roundtable with the nonprofits. And then we did another roundtable with the development community and so forth. So they have been a part of this process from day one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I see we have a question or comment from John. If you want to unmute and turn your video on, please.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'd just like to say I agree with everyone else who's supportive of the Mayor Scarpitti's efforts to go after these issues, very important for our society, and all the work that I've seen Emily and Daryl and everyone else who's producing this material, doing this research, very well done. And I think we're going to get there. I have a few questions, fairly straightforward. Last year, the York region introduced a development charge deferral program that was adopted by Vaughan. And I began, and our group began working with the CMHC on that. And then we began looking to see if Markham would do that. I've lived in Markham since 1985. I raised my family here. I'd love to try and find housing solutions that work in Markham and continue building this great city we have. So I'd like to know if that has been considered. The development charges, when we were looking at a proposed building, it averaged about $60,000 a unit. For a 2-bedroom unit, approaching $65,000. When you're looking at affordability criteria of ownership prices of $471,000 or renting of $1,337 a month, those development charges are very significant. The other question I have, at a rent of $1,337 a month, even at historically low mortgage rates we currently have, $100,000 a mortgage cost about $425 a month. So, and after the last housing summit, had a talk with a builder, and he was saying it costs them, there is about $300 to $350 a square foot cost to build a condo. 1,000 square foot condo, say for a 2 or 3 bedroom unit, then is costing $350,000 just to build it. So if you need to make some money on that and sell it for 400, or call it 500,000, and mortgage it, somehow get financing for that, the mortgage alone would approach $2,000 a month. So $1,337 a month for rent is just a non-starter from a financial point of view. you have to allow for property taxes, obviously, and utilities and maintenance and renovation every so many years, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and also there's a disparity between that number and what we found the CMHC was looking at, which was approximately $1,800 to $1,900 a month for a 2-bedroom place. So I just wonder if there's some different statistics at play there. They were using the census numbers. I'm not sure if maybe your sources are finer, it's more detailed, specific to Markham. Of course, there's always a joke. Does anyone in Markham ever reveal their full global income when they're doing those surveys? The other question I had was on the affordability requirement for the rental. It said it was not applicable to purpose-built rental. Does that mean purpose-built rental is outside of the incentive program, or that there's no affordability criteria imposed on purpose-built rental? So sorry, I'm hitting you with 3 questions at once, but I had to wait.
That's okay. It's a good thing we didn't make you wait any longer.
Oh yeah, I was writing them down.
Okay, thank you for your questions. All really, really great questions. In terms of the DC deferral program, we are working with York Region. Markham has 3 actions specifically for incentives. And so we're looking at individual incentives, financial and non-financial, as well as a program. So we are working with York Region when developments come forward to try and make sure that we can support them as best we can. In terms of the average market rent, 1337 reflects the rent. It is a CMHC figure. It is in their rental market report and it's published annually. It is data that is 2 years ago. So the current average market rent is over $1,500, and our strategy will reflect those updated numbers as we move forward. The data in their phase 1 report was based on what was available at the time. And yes, it is lower. It's also reflective of the limited supply in Markham. So it is reflective of a small sort of pocket of units. And Action 2 does look at the definition of affordable housing. So we will be taking a look at that and align ourselves with York Region and see how they align more closely. Your third question is no purpose-built rental. That applies to inclusionary zoning. That means that at this time, if a purpose-built rental building is considered, right now what is proposed is that there's no affordable unit set aside for that. We understand the challenge of developing purpose-built rental. And at this point in time, our market assessment has told us that it would be wise to refrain from requiring the set-aside unit, and that's only in relation to inclusionary zoning. It doesn't refer to any of the incentive programs.
Okay, thank you. I see we also have a question or comment from Renee. If you'd like to unmute and turn on your video. Oh, there we go. Good evening, Renee.
Good evening. Lots of steps involved to be able to have you hear me and see me. So I appreciate that. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for holding this forum. It's been really, really insightful. My question has to do with actually basement apartments, legal basement apartments. And I didn't hear about them at all throughout the report. And I am a rookie when it comes to affordable housing. I'm actually a new board member for or on MICA. So this is a whole new world for me, but I'm very interested in it. So my question is, I understand that legal basement apartments that were built prior to 1995 are allowed in Markham. However, any basement apartment, legal or non-legal, but let's just stick to legal, that has been built after 1995 are not allowed in Markham. Can you tell me why that is? And I'm surprised at that, because I would think that that would open up a whole host of housing for people. So I'm really curious as to what the answer is. Thank you.
Hello. Yes, thank you very much for your question. I think it's a complicated answer. It's changing provincial legislation, the need for a provincial register of affordable housing and so forth. that led to that situation, Renee. We could probably provide you with a better answer offline or on our website, because there is some history to this one. But affordable housing, secondary suites has not been forgotten through this this study. It is part of the recommendations. We did hear about a question about that earlier today, and so again, it's a matter that will be brought forward to council for consideration, prioritization, and possible implementation. Thanks.
And just to add to that, just a little bit about the changes with the province, they've even changed the language recently that it's now referred to as additional residential units. So when you look at different policy directions that are out there, you may see references to second units, you may see references to ancillary, accessory, as well as additional residential units. So as Arvind said, it is a very complex space on that terminology, but it is something that we're looking at, and there is a specific action within this draft strategy for that. So with that, I see Fred has a comment or question. If you want to turn on your mic and video.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Daryl and Emily, it's good to see and speak with you again. Arvind, you and the team here at Markham are doing a phenomenal job, and I appreciate the openness that staff has had for a lot of the ideas and suggestions that we have been bringing forward. I also want to thank all the participants today who've really been adding some real value in the discussion. Just wanted to highlight a couple of ideas as opposed to questions. Number one is looking at the difference in the way that rent subsidies are created and deployed when you look at a single tier government like Toronto or London versus a two-tier government system such as York Region and Markham. Toronto has found a way to hit deep affordability in a particular way. They've also found a way to do rent supplements, and that's part of the bridging of a gap between an ODSP monthly income of individuals at $497 a month to the minimum rent that you're trying to get to. For purposes of experience, I want to share something that unfortunately is not completely in public domain, but could have been, is a November 4th presentation that I gave to Housing York Inc. Our organization, RENA, and I work with Gary in that space. Housing York Inc. made an offer to RENA and a number of organizations that work with people with disabilities to rent up to 8 one-bedroom units in a new affordable development called Woodbridge Lanes. And we showed what it actually would cost to bridge the gap between individuals who are on ODSP and what was being offered by Housing York Inc. in their definition of affordable. So for those who are thinking that there's an answer there, there's actually more work to be done. We did a straight comparison between that and a point that was made, I think, by the MICA speakers, specifically on how does a not-for-profit partner with a for-profit. In this case, we work with Fieldgate, who is a for-profit housing developer, but we've contracted with them to be the project manager for the construction of our new building, which is going to open up in May. We are still having challenges in hitting the affordability number for people that are on a particular restricted area, but I think it's worth, and I offered to Daryl and Emily to take you through the numbers when we did a comparison between Woodbridge Lanes built by Housing York Inc. and the new building that's opening up for RENA in May that will house 136 individuals, 79 units in a mix of affordable and at market rates. Just recognize as well, when you work with CMHC, they can put covenants on you, such as a certain percentage of your units must be at 80% of market rate. I've seen in Kingston that they've gone as low as 60% of market rate. And again, that municipality has figured out a way by using capital to make things work in making things more affordable. So again, I just offer to say that there are numbers out there today, and there is a working example of an organization that has gotten the mortgage from CMHC, gotten a mortgage from Infrastructure Ontario, gotten waivers from both the City of Vaughan and York Region on development charges. And at the end of all of that, we still have a gap to close. So you have to recognize that there's a lot of work to be done, but there are experiences that can be shared as how you work across all levels of government and continue to work. And again, I appreciate the time that Daryl and Emily have taken to listen to some of those ideas, and perhaps there will be more, especially Daryl, I think you had a request on modular housing and how that's played out. And I'm working to try and get you a meeting with Kitchener-Waterloo where that actually has occurred in the developmental services community.
Perfect. Thank you, Fred. I really appreciate those comments. What you're saying really builds on some of those actions in the draft strategy around the fact of the partnerships, building this common understanding of what is out there. Where are the success stories? How did we navigate the system? There is no one size fits all in many cases for dealing with affordable and rental housing. So hearing those stories, it's very enlightening to hear how people can navigate through the system and realize affordable and rental housing. So would love to meet with you again and chat further about this and sort of delve into some of those numbers further as we continue through this process. With that in mind, I do want to say we're at our last question for the evening. So I think it's Crystal is the last person for this evening. If you wanted to turn on your mic and video, actually, you're already ahead of me.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Oh, great. I wanted to ask a particular question about student housing with the impending building of York University. Has anybody taken that aspect into consideration? Because once the students arrive in Markham, there won't be much rental left. And the question is, has that been built into the strategy for affordable housing?
So I think at this point, as my colleague Emily had mentioned earlier, right now we have a very limited amount of rental. This is something that's very important. That's why it's one of the core objectives of this housing strategy. It needs to be looking at affordable and rental housing for all, and also looking and being responsive to what's changing in the community. So if there are different student needs coming in that are going to influence the housing market, of course, we're going to need to be looking at those and figuring out what's the appropriate response and make sure that we have appropriate policies for that. So as we've been very closely working with York University on the work that they're doing, it's something that we're taking very seriously. It's something that we do need to look at in order to make sure that we have rental.
I think it has been looked at in cities like what is it, Whitby? Whitby and Toronto have thrown up their hands because the rentals were just snapped up. So I think we need to really seriously look at student housing in our city, over and above everything else.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly interject, not to take a whole lot of time on it right now, but York University, if they haven't already put it out, they are preparing requests for proposals for the private sector to respond to build some purposely built, I'll call it a student housing. So if that's not been issued yet, it will be shortly. And I think actually Markham Council will see a particular proposal of how one developer wants to respond to that call. So you're absolutely right, and it's obviously appropriate to put that housing as close to the campus as possible as well.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think we're now at the end of our questions for this evening. And with that in mind, I want to once again thank everybody for taking the time on this evening with us, as well as for going over in time. This is a really important issue. We want to make sure we get it right, and we hear the inputs and comments and feedback that will help inform the development of the final affordable rental housing strategy. So with that in mind, as I'd mentioned, yourvoicemarkham.ca, sounding a bit like a broken record now, but if you go to yourvoicemarkham.ca, look at the draft affordable rental housing strategy, you will also see an option to sign up for notifications. So as everyone registered for this evening's event, we have your email addresses and your information. So we'll keep you informed as we continue down our journey around the affordable and rental housing strategy. But also, in case there are others that were forwarded the invite, please go to Your Voice Markham. Make sure that you've clicked under our to be notified, and it will ask you for your email address, and we'll keep you informed that way. You will also find our contact information for Emily, myself, online, so that we can provide any additional feedback that may have been spurred by this conversation that we've been having, and the variety of really great questions and comments for us to be considering through this exercise. So we'll also be having a survey being put up by the end of the week, so that way it can help maybe tease out some additional thoughts. And we will also get the polling questions from today's presentation will be put on Your Voice Markham with the results for anybody that also was not able to see it due to technology. We will also be having this presentation, and as I mentioned at the beginning, the recording of today's event will be also put on that Your Voice Markham page. So that way anybody that was unable to participate this evening will have an opportunity to see it. And please take that opportunity and reach out to us if you have ideas and suggestions on this strategy. So with that, I am going to bring this meeting to close. I really appreciate that for everyone attending. Mr. Mayor for attending, as well as all of the councilors that have attended this meeting as well. Thank you again, and have yourselves a great evening.